Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% be part of society? Yes, I have made it on my own in this world. Will not take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start my own nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome, everybody. Welcome, particularly to MTB Matty, who's new to the show, but to everybody else. Matty, it usually starts with me in a bit of silliness, and so this is today's silliness. Welcome to blankety blank, blankety blank, blankety blank, blankety blank. And we're straight to the first question. You can interactive today, people. Interactive. You can answer on the chat if you want. And your first clue is political blank. Political blank. And I'm going to go to the members of the panel and see what they suggest to give you ideas as you give your Paul, political blank.
Chaos.
Political chaos. A good one for the first question today. That's what Neil, political.
I would have to say advisor.
Political advisor. Rishi Sunak in dire need of one. And Jane, political.
I can only think of corruption.
Political corruption rife at number 10. Oh, and what even political mayhem, says Leanne. Sort of well, no, that's all. No other guesses. Well, you're all wrong, of course. I'm surprised, team, that you didn't get the answer. It's political unmuted. And I don't know what on earth you're all thinking of. I don't know. Political madness, says Mark Longley. No, that's just me, Mark. Okay, here we go. Let's start the show. Have a slightly different moment of the week for you this week. Sort of, Paul, moment of your week.
I'm going to play a video for you because this hasn't gone anywhere, and this was something that's been made for a little while by an amazing video maker called Ewan. And Ewan made this video for my campaign to be Sedgefield's LP candidate for the next election. But obviously they don't want people who are like this. It's quite interesting that they've already called a campaign rally on Friday morning. And I was just thinking like how people who have to work can't do politics, you know, because I couldn't have gone. So if I'd have won, if I'd have been allowed to stand and I'd have won, I wouldn't have been allowed to go to my own launch rally. I think maybe it wasn't meant for me. I think they always had someone else in mind. So here you go. We're gonna play this as a bit of a world exclusive. We didn't want it to go anywhere because it is good. But these are the type of people that the Labour Party do not want to stand in anywhere really, especially in Sedgefield. So here we go.
This isn't a career choice. I've got a sense of duty. I genuinely want to help people. I think people have lost faith in politicians. I think they've lost faith in the political system. My name's Paul Daly. I'm a teacher. I'm a parish councillor in Wingate. I've been the chair of Sedgefield Constituency Labour Party since 2017. I like to ride my bike. I also coach cycling. I've lived in County Durham my whole life and I love the area and the people. As a teacher, I understand the concerns of the community and I know that we all deserve better than this government. I got into politics through the trade union movement. I was a workplace representative in a school after a colleague lost his life in an avoidable tragedy. I wanted to make sure that this never happened to any of my colleagues again. This work led to me being awarded NHS UWT Young Activist of the Year. It also led to me being able to go to TUC Congress. This led to me joining the Labour Party. You'll have heard what people told us on the doorstep in 2019, that they weren't being listened to. I've been committed to listening to members and the community to find out what they really want. I've proven that I'm honest, I'm proven that I listen. I've already shown that I can deliver. Time and again, I've taken the challenge to Paul Howell, exposing what his votes mean for our area. I know that I'm a candidate that he does not want to face. If I win, I'm taking your voice with me to Westminster. It's time your voice was heard.
So yeah, that's what you could have won. Never mind.
Sort of, my question to you now, Paul, is therefore move forward, not look back. You've got all those skills, all that experience, all that vision. What are you going to use it for now? The Labour Party have told you that they don't want you.
Firstly, I'm not going to waste my time on the internal bureaucracy of the Labour Party. I've already given that up, and a big, massive waste of time when you could be doing something good. I've got a few ideas about what to do in the short term. There's a big section of me coaching there, which is really nice because the person who is called Ewan Preston, who wanted he wanted to show what I'm really like and what I do on a daily basis. So that wasn't like a setup. We didn't invite a cycling club along, and you know, like, I suppose I didn't have to do anything. I just had to get on with my own life, and that's what I do. So I'll continue doing things like that, things that I love, and I'll also spend a bit more time with my family, which I spent decent amounts anyway, but I'll continue doing that. And I've got a few community projects that are in the pipeline as well, like community interest companies, things that are actually going to change people's lives. One of the things I think is really affecting people at the moment, especially post-COVID, is physical and mental health. And I think they're linked. So I'm going to try and do something around that to try and get more people active, more people feeling comfortable to get active. People maybe who've been in refuges, and you know, or maybe have different reasons for not wanting to get fit and not feeling comfortable in that kind of environment. We're going to try and do something to try and help those people. So that's something I'm quite excited about. With regards to politics, we've got a big thing coming up soon where we're going to try and, I don't know, emulate what the people who founded the Labour Party did a long time ago, and try and bring politics to the people again and try to do something that actually means something that's meaningful. I think the Labour Party is now, for the corporations, it's a corporate body. It's another aspect of the establishment. We tried our best to change that. It hasn't worked, and we put our efforts elsewhere. That's my current feeling. So yeah.
Thank you. There's people that are saying that you're a visionary, but you would say, I think, that, and you have said many times, that you're a signpost, not a weather vane. Just explain to people about what you mean by that, rather than being a visionary, that you're a signpost, not a weather vane.
I have a clear set of values that I would always stick to, and I think it's really obvious. And there was a really interesting clip that you put in the Political Unmuted chat earlier on, John. It was, and we'll probably reference it later, and it was about climate change and Starmer saying something a couple of years ago when it mattered to try and look like he cared about climate change, and then saying the exact opposite. And that's not what I'm going to do. I will always say the same things. I'll always have the same beliefs. I might have my opinion changed about specific things, but that will not be on a value basis. So my values will remain the same. I'll always do what's best for the collective. I'll always do what's best for people democratically. I'll always listen to people. That's who I am, and that's how you can be a signpost where people know which direction you're pointing. And my direction is always towards the people. It is always for the benefit of everyone else. And everyone's like this on here, you know, we're not flip-flopping around. We're not pretending to be something we aren't. We're not doing things to try and be popular and get elected. I don't think if we were trying to be popular, we'd currently be going around calling ourselves Socialist Think Tank at the moment, given the vitriol you get from that. And you wouldn't be trying to, as a left-winger, stand in the Labour Party when I was trying to do that if you wanted an easy life, and if you wanted, you know, if you were trying to do things easily. There's so many easier things that you could have done, but that's not what it's about, is it?
Thank you. So Leanne says her moment of the week is going a whole week without watching the House of Commons live and feeling absolutely fine about it. You're sort of, Leanne, why beat yourself up? Do you hate yourself so much that you put yourself through that on a regular basis? No, leave it behind. Sort of let them make each other miserable. Neil, moment of the before I come to, so I've been watching your Facebook feed, and there's just been some really upsetting stuff, upsetting memories and things like that on your Facebook feed. Sort of, I am so sorry to read what I've been reading. I mean, do you want to open up about that, or you just want to go straight into your moment of the week?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken publicly and posted publicly about it. It's basically relating to what I went through working at Bradford Council, where I worked in children's services, and I was the senior union rep for Unite the Union. whilst working there, and basically I was bullied out of my job because I kept calling out how bad things were in the council. I directly warned the council that if it continues as they are, that they will lose control of children's services, and that's what happened. And I suffered a breakdown in February 2020 as a direct result of how I was being treated by Bradford Council, and they basically sacked me as a result of having a breakdown. Then they try and say they're a good employer, you know. So yeah, I was in a dark place 2 years ago when that happened. 'Cause it was 2 years ago this week that sacked me, but I was in a dark place then. But I'm in such a far better place now. I'm far happier, and also much to their annoyance, I actually came back at them, not through the because the problem is when you are sacked, you only get 3 months less a day to take tribunal. They take an employer to tribunal, and of course, I had to work on self-preservation. I had to, look after myself. So I didn't take it to tribunal, but I came back and spoke out publicly and laid out all the evidence that I had to show that all that's happening in children's services was entirely preventable in Bradford.
Thank you. It was truly distressing what I read. I'm glad that you're in a happier place now. Moment of your week, then.
Do you know, I've actually thought quite a lot about this. You see, Matt Hancock going into I'm a Celebrity. I mean, I haven't watched it for about, I don't know, 15 years at least. But it would have been my moment of the week if everyone else would have walked out the moment that he walked in. But that didn't happen, sadly. So that can't be a moment of the week. If
Well, they're all going to die, aren't they? I mean, as soon as he has anything to do with it, that's it. And there'll be no protection against anything out there.
Well, he should do really well there, because I mean, the amount of arseholes is going to have to he's going to have to be close to the amount of snakes that are there. It's kind of like, he should fit in very well with him and the Tory party, and the competition as well is. It should be. It's his second home. I mean, in fact, actually, we need to check his expenses to see whether he's claiming it as a second home as well, or a third home even. But no, my moment of the week was today in Bradford. Some fella called Charlie came to visit Bradford.
Yes.
And so one of the world's richest men came to one of the poorest cities in the UK to wave at people for a few minutes, and we're all expected to be delighted about the fact that he can wave at people. I went down there to photograph it from 2 points of view. I wanted to, hopefully there'd not been many people there, so I could have shown that actually not many people are bothered. But actually, the Centenary Square in Bradford was full, to be honest with you, or practically full, or feeling like some kind of protest against the king and having a monarch thrust upon us. And there wasn't much there apart from one man who held up a blank piece of paper, and police suddenly rushed over to him and started questioning him. So I went over and got a shot of that, and I was quite happy with that, because I then managed to photograph some kind of protest, and all he said is, "I'm holding up a blank piece of paper," and the police said, "Well, but people might take offence to that." And he said, "Well, to what?" I said, "Well, they might read something on it." He said, "Well, there's nothing written on it, so that you can't blame me for what other people might, imagine is on a piece of paper," which was quite a funny conversation to have. But it mirrors what happened in London just after the Queen died. When people were being arrested for shouting "Not my king" and holding up signs saying "Not my king," a barrister held up a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, to see how much the freedom of speech actually goes to. And he got questioned by police. He didn't get arrested, didn't have his details taken, but they still wanted to know what on earth he was doing.
It reminds me, Neil, of East Germany before the communist regime collapsed there, with the Stasi and everything, and they had the white shirt protests. And what they did is they wore a white shirt and they went down to the town centres and they just stood around in a white shirt. And the way the British police are dealing with blank pieces of paper is more aggressive than the Stasi was with that white shirt. The Stasi didn't know how to cope with it. They sort of, what can you do? They're wearing a white shirt. Sort of, they were bewildered. But the
Well,
police are just
I
bullying.
imagine the police are more aggressive with people wearing white shirts than they were to people wearing black shirts in the 1930s.
So anyway, sort of I've never been able to understand the worship of the monarchy.
No.
I just have never been able to understand people openly supporting that icon of privilege and unfairness and legal brutality. Just horrific. Jane, sort of a moment of sort of everybody. Jane is our star. She knows more than all the rest of us, and she's clever. Just wait. I mean, sort of Paul's done his little video, and Neil's talked about the king. Jane will have something really deep. Jane, what's your moment of the week? And not that I'm building you up, or anything like this. Don't feel any pressure. What's your moment of the week?
I've gone a bit more mainstream this week, so because this week's just gone like a whirlwind. But I remember a few years ago hearing about what was going on in Qatar, and the use of slave labour to prepare a stadium for the World Cup, and I remember signing a petition against it and thinking this won't be allowed to happen. And I'm not really interested in sport or football at all. So I don't really know what's going on. And I can't believe this is happening. It's really happening. I've become aware in the last few weeks that actually we're going to have the World Cup in Qatar, despite the fact that there are reports that over 6,000 people, human beings, have already died building the stadium and surrounds as slave labour. Other people are still being used as slaves there. The absolutely unacceptable stance of that regime to LGBTQ plus people and women, everything about it, and the allegations of corruption around the bid, and the whole world is just, including me, we've just let this happen. This is just not okay. It's so wrong, and I can't believe it's happening, and there's no real fuss about it.
I mean, the whole thing. There's a big thing on the. Sorry, my poster's dropping off the wall. There's a big thing on the news about one of the ambassadors saying in an interview to a German television crew that homosexuality is the result of damage to the mind. This is one of the ambassadors. Wales are thinking of creating safe houses for LGBTQ plus supporters. What on earth have we allowed this to happen? And the footballers, their position is absolutely impossible because we're sending them across there and telling them, just try and concentrate on the football. We don't want you to talk anything about what's going on. And it is just horrific. And it really rather reminds me of the time that the England went to the World Cup in, or was it the Olympics in, I think it was the World Cup in Germany. All gave the Nazi salute, all stood and gave the Nazi salute during the German national anthem. And sort of, we've just not made a stand, have we?
It just shows how much money talks, doesn't it? Because that's what this is all about. Because every bit of decency in me says, doesn't matter how much money is at stake, everyone needs to walk away from this. Although I do feel the footballers themselves have been put in an impossible position. It's not them I'm talking about, but the organisers, everyone should walk away from this and never have put anyone in the situation where they have to put their career on the line to make a stand about this. And it's not going to happen.
Yeah, awful. Thank you, everybody. Slightly longer for moments of the week this week, but some really key issues addressed there. Thank you so very much. And lovely people, aren't they? Hey, aren't you proud that this is your team? I'm certainly proud. Next.
Now it's time for the big story.
Ian Terry asks, how many times Qatar won the first cup? Won the World Cup?
Never. It's sarcasm, isn't it? They've never won the World Cup.
You don't have to have won the World Cup to.
Maybe it could be like Eurovision. The people who won it last host it next.
Party in Brazil a lot.
We would never have got to Brazil. The weather's nice, not nice. Thank you for your comments, everybody. Leanne says she's a football fan and won't be watching any of it. Sort of as an ally to the LGBTQ community. God bless you, Leanne. Polar Knights. I'm a huge football fan, but I'm not going to watch it on the telly. Just can't be a part of this. It's really frightening, isn't it? Okay, big story. Tory chaos. Paul, kick us off. Integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. That's what we were promised by Rishi Sunak when he became Prime Minister. Integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. How are they doing?
They're doing awful, aren't they? But like, it's really difficult for them to have those things given that their personnel. It's like they are limited. So if we're talking about football quite a lot, if you had a football team and they were full of terrible players who do terrible things.
You mean Sunderland?
How dare you? How dare you? Sunderland are lovely now. They're proper nice lads now. Sunderland. They're actually quite a nice, quite a nice, kind-spirited bunch of lads now, which is quite different from some teams in the past. There's no sports washing going on at Sunderland, apart from they've got a fascist on the board there. So I suppose, like, you know, a Uruguayan fascist. But you know, that seems to be football now. It's not exactly the Saudi Arabian Saudi Arabian nation. But anyway, so if you have just terrible personnel, you're going to choose terrible people to be in your cabinet. And this is why Rishi Sunak chose Suella Braverman at the beginning to go back to being, I think she's Home Secretary, isn't she? And she's terribly, terribly anti-immigrant and says all these awful things. But also, like, Gavin Williamson he must know a lot of bad things about people, because he always seems to be put in charge of things, and it turns out he's been a real nasty bully behind the scenes. But I am old enough to remember, and I love that phrase on Twitter when that comes up, because it's always something 2 weeks ago, when he was sacked for leaking secrets that was potentially a treason. And that seemed not to matter to other people, to put him back in cabinets and things. And, you know, it doesn't seem to matter what they do. They'll just, I don't know, the worst thing that'll happen to them is they're put on holiday for a few weeks. And, well, tell you what, you go away for about 3 months, come back, be on the front bench, it'll be fine. You know, we'll do this. He has resigned now. He's been forced to resign. Not because he's done anything wrong, of course, because he said he hasn't done anything wrong. But he realises that now he's a distraction because he told someone else that they should go and slit the throat in a series of things that were, you know, heat of the moment set of text messages over a period of 3 weeks or something like that. We've all done it. We've all been annoyed in the heat of the moment for 3 straight weeks.
Paul, and just say that when you hear what goes on in Parliament, the drunkenness and the bullying and the comments and the tweets and sort of all that leaked report from the Labour Party with all those emails passing between each other, this would never happen, even in the most second-class small building firm. They have higher standards of how they treat each other than we do in the seat of government. I find it absolutely shocking that these things go on. None of them fit to employ.
They live in a different world. They live in a totally different world to us. They have entirely different standards. They're incredibly entitled. And I think, you know, today I was talking about, remember when Damien Green was found to have been using a government computer in the something to do with defence, wherever he was, Ministry of Defence. He was in there every day, allegedly, according to a whistleblower, watching porn all day, every day. Now, how stupid do you have to be to think that you wouldn't get caught? Or how entitled, or what kind of mix is that But nothing happened to him. He ended up becoming deputy prime minister after doing that. You know, to Theresa May. So these are just these new things that have come out are just another ridiculous thing that shows that these are not real people. They do not live lives like you or I would live. They are completely divorced from working class people and from people who do ordinary jobs. We've got intense scrutiny on us. I think like the scrutiny that is on teachers. I was in a thing the other day about Ofsted and about what they're going to do. And Ofsted are quite getting a little bit better, to be honest. They seem to be a lot more understanding than they used to be, despite the ridiculous curriculum that they're making us do from the DFE. But Ofsted seem to be getting slightly better over time. But the scrutiny that teachers are under, like, you know, people wandering into your classroom and checking on you and checking that you're marking your books and all this stuff, all this intense stuff, and there's no scrutiny at all on these people. They might be in the public eye, but when they're caught doing anything wrong, nothing happens. They just rotated for a minute. It's like a squad rotation
if I move
system.
on, Paul, Mark Lungley suggests he was chief whip, so he knows where all the skeletons are. I mean, do you think is that kind of relationship that basically sort of I'll take you down if you don't support me, that kind of thing? Is that the relationship? Do you think that's going on there? Or have you any other ideas?
Well, I think there's an element of that, but they don't seem bothered. I think we're in this post-truth era. I think this is a Boris Johnson thing. You know, Boris Johnson doesn't believe that the truth exists. And we're also in the Steve Bannon playbook as well. And I think people don't really realise what influence Steve Bannon and his strategies have had on the world of politics. If you look at the people who've been successful worldwide on the right wing, they're all working together. Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, they're all working with Steve Bannon. And it's this kind of like, it's a bit Linton Crosby, dead cat kind of, let's just throw a different strategy in there and get people talking about that. Let's throw like a big scandal in. But also it's this like, that didn't really happen, so therefore, it's similar to the Koch brothers for years and years have been funding anti-climate change science. And if you put that little seed of doubt in there, 99.9% of research might say this, but actually the research funded by the Koch brothers is saying that it's perfectly safe to continue burning fossil fuels forever. And, there's a bit of doubt there. And I think that's what's going on. So yes, they do know where the bodies are buried, but are they really scared of what comes out? I think it's just a game to them. I don't think they're bothered.
Thank you. I mean, Jacqueline Hemmings, I think they thrive on the fact that they know they won't be held to account. Jane, just switching from his team, which is a nightmare. I love the description on the Now show of Suella Braverman, brought in to try and show us how reasonable Priti Patel was. But thinking about Rishi Sunak, do you think he cuts a better figure? Emily Maitlis was sort of being taken to task on Twitter for showing a picture of him and Macron and sort of saying how pleased she was that he was interacting with Europe and that we had two smart leaders here, and a relief was how she described it. I mean, do you think Rishi Sunak cuts the mustard?
I think the bar's been set so low, hasn't it, that you don't have to be particularly civilised with Europe before you look a lot better than Boris Johnson. No, I don't have a lot of time for Sunak. He presided as Chancellor over the VIP lane, where we spent billions of public money on defective PIP from mates of MPs. He did the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. He took money back from people on universal credit who desperately needed it. His failed economics, along with the rest of his party, have destroyed public services in this country, starved people to death, led people to suicide, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of people even before the pandemic. So, and and it really bothers me too, on a smaller note, that whilst being the Chancellor of this country, when everyone was just trying to survive and trying to pull together during the pandemic, he thought it was okay to hold a green card. I feel he just saw it as a career stepping stone for this country and have a star on his CV and then hop off somewhere else and do something more exciting. I've got no time for him at all. I think he's not the sort of politician that I would want anywhere near Parliament. And I'm so sad that he's the Prime Minister now, and the calibre of people that he's put into that pandemic. It's musical chairs with the same bunch of corrupt, awful people who say terrible things that have been dancing around the front benches for the last, I don't know, is it 12 years now?
Thank you, Paul. That's the clip. That last sentence is the clip that we put out. I got so excited about that last sentence, I've forgotten the question I was going to ask you. One thing that strikes me, Jane, is that everybody knows what went on. I mean, he even attended one of the parties and claimed he didn't know it was a party, as bad as Boris Johnson. But people just, well, that's all the past. And the wedded to the gaslighting, the propaganda they're being fed now. I mean, how do we change people so that they have some kind of degree of common sense and remember even the recent past when they're assessing their politicians? What have we got to do you think?
I think the best thing I can think of is to offer people hope, offer them a decent solution, like what Labour was doing in 2017 and 2019 with a Green New Deal and decent policies that would have transformed people's lives. I think that's what we need to focus on, because a lot of us are exhausted at the moment and it really feels hopeless, and we're up against such a barrage of negativity and prejudice all around us. And we, the political vehicle that Labour seemed to be during that period when Corbyn was leader, that seems to have swallowed up now and gone another direction. So I think we're all feeling, well, how can we do it? But the speed at which that movement gathered momentum and followers, I don't know how we do it, but it's there. We need to just get that hope back.
Lovely comments on the chat, people. Mick Hills, God bless you, Mick. It's so lovely to see you. All these right-wing actors across the board are upheld by a biased press. And I think that's a key thing, because we don't seem to have any standards to hold the politicians to account, and the press fail to do so. You're absolutely correct. Jan Gray, our government are the laughingstock of the whole world, all the way from France to New Zealand. Are they still, Jan? That's the question that we're discussing right now. Has Rishi Sunak, and to what extent has Rishi Sunak restored the credibility of the British government? Certainly seems to have calmed the markets a little. But I'm going to read Jacqueline Hemmings, who's sort of always says things, but it's a long one, but so bear with me. On Cow Daily earlier, they were discussing shop workers getting abused by members of the public, which is probably a domino effect of Tory policy. And on Not the Andrew Marr Show, which I haven't watched yet, there is the discussion on antidepressants and how there is an increase in people being on them. And yes, sort of echoing what you said about the depression and the giving up. Finally, Neil, on this, what can we do about it then? What's your solution to this problem of useless politicians just changing positions around the table?
Well, first of all, in terms of the comments about the media, the Morning Star's a shining example as a daily socialist paper that actually does try to hold people to account, and I think that's very worth noting. And the more that people promote that, the better. So please do it. I'm a little bit biased because I'm one of their photographers, so I've got to make that clear as well. I'm not employed by them. I'm a freelancer, but they do take a lot of my work. but happy to promote social work. And what we do on here every week as well, we're attempting to make people aware of what's going on and give a different narrative, along with not the Andrew Marr show and not PMQ as well, which is also done by Labour Grassroots, and as well as Milk the Cow podcast as well. There are plenty of voices out there that are trying to give a different narrative, and as Paul says every week, the more we promote these voices, the better it will become for us, because no one's going to promote this for us. We've got to do it ourselves. But in terms of holding politicians to account, there's, I mean, I don't see this in just in government. I do see this a lot in local government as well, because I mean, I've been trying to hold politicians to account in Bradford for the past 8 years for what's happened to children's services. The council leader's been council leader since 2016, together with a chief exec who, it's an absolute car crash, which is probably the one thing they had in common with Prince Charles today. How do we get it? We need to change the system. It's the one thing I keep saying time and time again. The longer we allow this system to happen, the longer it will continue. We need to get organised. We need to stop the factionalism on the left. I'm not interested whether you're a member of Socialist Alternative, Socialist Party, Socialist Worker. Your fight is my fight. Let's come together and let's blooming get rid of them once and for all. But the key thing is, we need to educate people that there's a better way. This isn't the right way. This is not how it should be, and have a healthy, grown-up democracy.
Thank you. Realizing that sort of getting rid of the occasional animal is not the answer, it's the breed. That's the problem. We need socialism, and we need them to move towards socialism. Thank you so much. Let's move to the other stories, because we just got two and we can whip through them quickly. Appalling report on the police this week, recently, I think yesterday. Tell us about it, Jane.
So there was a report commissioned after the revelations of the rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving police officer into misogyny in the police force, and the results have come out and they're really damning. They found that in all of the forces that they had looked into, there was a prevalent culture of misogyny and predatory behaviour towards both female police officers, staff and members of the public. And every single female police officer and staff member who they spoke to had experienced harassment by colleagues, and some of them have been assaulted by colleagues, which is awful. They found 131 questionable employment decisions, with officers who've been cleared to join the force having committed domestic abuse related assaults, indecent exposure, robbery, including I think one officer who'd robbed an 80-year-old woman, knocked her to the ground, and they thought that was appropriate to clear these people to work in the force and be in a position of power over vulnerable people.
Read it if you're watching, people. Just read the news reports, even on the BBC. Listen to this. The review. These 131 out of 725 looked at. 131. These aren't people with question marks. These were people who the review found shouldn't have been allowed to be police officers. So the review found officers passed vetting despite having criminal records, being suspected of serious offences, having substantial debts, or having family links to organised crime. Horrific. And then Jane's absolutely right. If you read the Guardian article on it, they give some really just terrible spit. So, Jane, clearly linked to the Sarah Everard case.
It's a really frightening thing to say, that it's a prevalent culture in every single force that they looked into. Is really frightening and really shines a light onto a lot of the other things we've heard in the media, even going back to after when there was the vigil for Sarah Everard, and the way that the peaceful people at the vigil were manhandled and disrespected by the force there. And there's been some other awful stories that have come out since about the way people have been treated by the police. And the super complaint as well is just, really damning.
The other thing
number
the report found was that the worst victims of this culture of these men are the female officers who have to work with them. They're the prime target for some of this behaviour. Does this not destroy that mutual trust, Jane, between the police and the police and the public? I mean, so what are we to think of the police that we meet in our day-to-day lives?
It's difficult because it will destroy people's trust. No doubt there are a lot of very decent police officers out there, though, but there's obviously something seriously wrong at the root of the whole system that needs to be addressed. And I remember watching the interview with Chantal Lunt that Socialist Think Tank did, and as an ex-female police officer, what she said, her own experience was really damning, to the point where I got the impression she felt it was a lost cause, and that you couldn't change it from beyond. It's so rotten, which this report also backs up. So there are clearly good people in there, but there are serious issues.
Neil, I was on a Facebook group, and I ran into one person who's was arguing very strongly that if we're going to deal with the problems out there, the problems of criminality, we need to give the police a freer rein. They need to be less accountable. I mean, I saw the eye roll there, but the question is how do you deal with an argument that sort of if we're going to deal with some of the violent crime that is out there, the violent people that that the police have to deal with on a daily basis, and we sort of metaphorically tie their arms behind their backs, are we not putting the police in an impossible? Nobody denies that the police need integrity, but if we sort of continually constrain them, are we not putting them in an impossible situation?
We far from constrain the police, far from it. It's not about constraining the police, it's about having accountability. And it links to what we were talking about previously. It does link to accountability for their actions. There's the police at the moment, as that report kind of highlights, that they're not being held to account. The police do have one hell of a free hand at the moment. They've got various pieces of legislation that have come through recent years, such as Police Crime Sentencing Courts Act, which the police themselves said we don't need, but they've got it, and it's a lot harder to hold the police to account because of that. There's the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Act, also known as CHIS, which, by the way, Labour abstained from voting against, which allows the police to snoop on us in ways that we're never going to know what they can and can't do. It's really about the being accountable. I mean, just before this show, I was talking about how journalists covering Just Stop Oil are being arrested. When you're arresting journalists, when the police are arresting the journalists, the system, they do not want to be held to account. And these same people that keep saying, "Oh, give them a free hand, give them a free hand." Well, when they're at the other end of a police truncheon, let's see how much they're then talking about give them a free hand, because that's when those people will then start calling for more police accountability. The police have, as I said at the beginning, police have one hell of a free hand. They're never held to account. The police do murder people. They are responsible for many people's deaths, and yet no one ever gets held to account. But on the other hand, when it's a civilian when a civilian then is responsible for the death of a police officer, it's 100% conviction rate. So I don't know what else that could be done to give him a free hand other than completely cover it up. But what's really needed is a truly independent police complaints commission that isn't full of ex-police officers, that has people on there that are from the ordinary community out there who can give a fair judgment. And yeah, nothing wrong with having the odd police officer part of it to give some guidance to what the police, from the police's perspective. But we need to, again, we need to change the system. I'm going to put that on loop, actually, change the system.
So actually, Jan Gray, more than 600, she believes, children have been strip searched by the police. She says that's a sexual assault. Mark Lungley says, little bit of news coming out that police arrested photographers and videographers covering the Just Stop Oil protests. And I find that horrific. Absolutely horrific. I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens in Israel when the IDF is attacking a Palestinian village, and they shut down the photographers. We don't want photographs of this happening and what we're doing. Really.
We can't move on from this without mentioning Julian Assange as well. He's a journalist who's in prison for exposing the truth as well. Healthy democracies don't lock up journalists that are exposing the truth. And absolute solidarity to Julian and his wife as well, and rest of the family.
Thank you. Mark Lungley, time to realise, here's a thought, time to realise the police don't... I've always got on very well, particularly with the neighbourhood police, who I found they were smashing when I was working them. But these are thoughts which are worthwhile thinking about. Time to realise the police don't stop crime. They're an internal army to keep order. Order for the rich. And I think there's an awful lot of truth to that. Paul, what's the solution? I mean, obviously, better vetting of police officers, but beyond that, how do we have this model of policing by consent in this country? It is being wrecked. How do you rebuild that?
Has it ever not been wrecked? Everyone has a different experience here. And like people have mentioned, there are some people who work in the police force who are perfectly nice people. I've had really good interactions with a lot of police. I've had some really negative interactions with the police as well. And I'm not really someone who does very much wrong. I'm not perfect, but I shouldn't really be in bother with the police. Growing up where I did, there's a lot of distrust. Like the police occupied Easington, where I used to live, during the miners' strike. So this, whether the trust's been there or not, is open for debate. When I'm talking about the police as well, what we need to do is we need to have a really sensible discussion around this, because every time people just react to things, they either say, "Oh, there's good people in the police," or they'll say, "Oh, you can't just get rid of the police," or whatever. Because remember when Black Lives Matter was saying that they should defund the police, and what they were saying is they should put it into mental health services and do other things rather than put loads of people in prison. That's what they were arguing. It was a much more American argument at the time, but it's relevant here as well. But that was just dismissed out of hand because people are so wedded to the idea of the police in their current form. When we're talking about the police, we're talking about an institution. We're not talking about the individuals that work in it. It's the same as when I talk about the royal family. I'm not talking about the members of the royal family. I'm talking about the institution and whether it's a good idea to have it. If the institution is behaving this way, then we need to totally rethink what is going on. A massive aspect of this for me, and it's been mentioned a few times, it's the press. I was listening on the radio and they tried to spin it and totally unchallenged on the radio. The person who was in charge of this said, yes, there are failures, but 90% of our vetting was successful. And the journalist who was interviewing that person didn't challenge them and say, so 10% of police shouldn't be working in the police. Is that what you're saying? 10%? Imagine if oh, well, 10% of the children in my class ended up having something seriously bad happen to them while I was teaching. That's a terrible amount. 10% is appalling.
Every 10th policeman you meet
Is a wrong
is unfit to be a policeman.
And it doesn't mean all the other ones aren't nice, you know what I mean? But this we're talking about institutionally, 10% shouldn't be in there. And what is attracting these people as well? Why do so many of these people want to be vetted by the police?
We're running out of time, and I won't get one more question in very quickly. But just before we move on, very quickly, Lane Hewitt says, "Defund the police is the stupidest slogan ever." Just address that quickly before I bring this to a close.
Yeah, I didn't come up with it. So I don't think it explains things very well. But we're not given the time. We're not given the time and space to describe anything properly, are we? It has to be a 3-word soundbite, otherwise people lose attention, or the press will be absolutely all over you. And every time you're trying to do things like in the long form, like we're doing, and really explaining our points of view, people don't like that. People don't want to hear a reasoned argument. They want to hear a three-word slogan.
As I understand it, the concept of defunding the police doesn't mean that we do away with the police. The concept is that we shift the funding to preventative things, to support services and things like that, and stop relying simply on punishment. This is what the Tories do, Lane. This is what the
Lane's suggestion as well that they should have said demilitarize the police. That probably describes what people are talking about a lot better, and it's a really good point. We do need to be careful about these things, but we do need time and space to describe things.
The Tories always say these are the rules and we're going to punish them if you don't follow them, and they think that works, and it doesn't. It's like in a school. If you just punish the pupils, sort of positive and praise is 10 times as powerful. Building support. Right, last question before we go and leave you, everybody. Paul referred to it earlier. Starmer going on and sort of saying that there are too many immigrants in the NHS. Neil, you may be the only person who gets a chance to talk about this. You can explode all over the screen.
It's not that kind of show. Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, it's an utterly disgusting thing that he said. We have to remember that not weekend just gone, the one before, there was a terrorist attack in Kent that was a result of extreme right-wing ideology. And of course, Suella Braverman then stood up in Parliament and talked about an invasion. And then, of course, we then get Keir Starmer talking about too many migrants working in the NHS. The reality is, if these migrants weren't working in the NHS, it would collapse tomorrow. If they all left tonight, it wouldn't be existing in 24 hours' time. What a disgraceful thing to do. And what he was saying is that we should train more British people to work in the NHS. Yeah, well, then why not argue for having the bursary put back in? Why not argue to increase pay? Which when nurses started talking about NHS 15, he slammed down on that and said, no, I'm not going to support you getting a pay rise in line with inflation. And yet he constantly talks about his sister working in the NHS as well. So it's kind of like, come on, which one are you taking? But of course, as Mark Lungley said earlier on, is a weather vane. And of course, it's shifted over here now. And it's now, all these blooming immigrants, coming here. Well, I was in hospital last week, and the blooming immigrants in that place is unbelievable. I mean, they gave me health advice. They came and checked I was okay. I mean, it's disgraceful. I mean, we really are going back to when Gordon Brown said we need British jobs for British people. And, why not put it on a slogan on a mug? Labour have done that before. That's really where we're heading to. It's dog whistle politics where, it's becoming harder and harder to define the difference between, the worst of the Tories and anything that Labour are doing under.
The worst of Labour. Grubby dog whistling, say the SNP. Danny Blanchflower, pure, unadulterated, delusional bollocks. Momentum, out of touch with the Labour Party and the Labour movement.
Well, you've got to remember that there are thousands and thousands of NHS staff are currently balloting for strike action as well. Now, of course, with him it's essentially attacking NHS workers, which is what he's doing in reality, that's going to make them think, well, we're not going to get anything from Labour. So, do you know, yeah, we will vote to strike. But when they go out on strike, don't forget he will attack them then as well. He will come out and say things like, well, yeah, they shouldn't need to strike. Well, why don't you start offering an alternative? Why don't you start being an opposition? It might just work.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Okay, absolutely right. Thank you for saying those things. Jane, I'm just going to drop two little things in, however. Jane, I've gone on this programme and said that it is morally unacceptable that this country lets what we used to call third world countries pay to train doctors and nurses. And then basically we hijack them and bring them to look after our NHS, and that we need to put resources into training our own doctors and nurses and sending them to other countries that don't have enough of them. How is what Keir Starmer said in the broader thing, how is it different to what we have said on this programme a number of times?
Well, it was just a stupid, ill-informed thing to say, to be honest. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but the number of vacancies in the NHS, we're tens of thousands short. I think 50,000 nurses. We're desperately short of doctors. Last year, then we had a lot more applications to study to become a doctor than there were places available. So lots of people got turned down and have had to look elsewhere and think about going abroad to do it. There were loads of vacancies. It was really an irresponsible dog whistle thing to say. And it's not the sort of thing that you'd hear spoken on this programme.
Thank you very much indeed, and absolutely correct. And Paul, last statement on this, you've got about 15 seconds.
He always does this. He always does. He didn't even need to bring this up. He was asked about immigration. He says, I think there are too many immigrants in the NHS. And I've seen people coming out and try to defend him, and they're saying, oh no, he was saying this, he was saying that we need to train more British people. Like we've said in the past, like you do need to train your own people to do jobs, and you need to make those very important jobs and highly paid jobs. But he didn't say that. He said he wanted to see people coming in and investing in this country. What he said is what he meant is
building factories for us to work in.
Yeah, build factories, and he meant extract wealth from our workers so that they can take it abroad. And he didn't want people to come over here and heal us and help us and be part of our communities. He does this every time. If it walks like a racist and talks like a racist, it's a racist. He does it too many times for it to be a coincidence. And people need to stop defending him. And those people who are complicit within the Labour Party and who think this is okay really need to have a good hard look into their souls, because I know what it's like being on the inside of that Labour Party and thinking, this hurts me on the inside. I can't stand being in here with all these racists in charge and these awful people in charge. So scratch that itch.
Thank you very much indeed. That is the end of the show. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you for all your comments. There was just one person who was just being silly throughout, trying to make clever comments throughout. Sort of, either come and be serious with us or be silly.
I liked it. There were comments about my beard and things like that. Me not having a man's beard.
Thank you so much, everybody. You're so lovely to us and so welcome to be with us. Thank you to the team, to Jane.
Thank you for having me.
No. Thank you, Jane. To Neil, goodbye.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure coming on here. Thank you.
Oh no, you're just a star. And finally to the boss, who's now going to witter on for a while, and then we'll all say goodbye. I'll say goodbye and thank you as well.
Thank you so much. Join Socialist Think Tank, become a member at socialistthinktank.com. If you want to donate to us, you can. It helps us do what we want to do. It helps us continue to do this. None of us get paid. We're all volunteers. But, you know, it's nice to be able to, like, not to cost us a load of money. So if you can do that, that is incredibly appreciated. Look out for other independent media association people. Lots of talk tonight about independent media. The IMA is a group of journalists who are working together. We do print media, we do social media, we do long form podcasts and all sorts of different things. Have a look out for our members. We are growing all the time, and if you want to do something as well, I'd advise you get involved with that. We are highly regulated by either being members of the National Union of Journalists or being members of Impress, which regulate us. We're not allowed to come on here and lie. We're not like the mainstream media who can just say whatever they want and print something in page 56 of the paper the next week when they've lied. We have to tell the truth. We can be biased, but we can tell the truth because all of us have our own biases. So please do get involved with that if you can. Thank you so much, everyone who's come on. Subscribe to all our things on there, and go and listen to something like we always talk about. Milk the Cow podcast, Cow Daily, and stuff like that. Their thing on long COVID yesterday was absolutely harrowing, but it's worth listening to. Especially, I've met quite a few people who are suffering with that at the moment, and it's something that maybe might help a few people. So go and do that. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for being involved. I liked all the comments, funny or serious. It was all good. I love people coming on and getting involved. So please do feel free to do that. And we will see you all next time.